And good evening, everyone. Mike Vukovcan, joined by my partner, Harry Psaros, here on Pitt Panther Talk, sponsored by our good friend Aaron Buhl and the Buhl Insurance Agency. Insurance needs, it's that time of the year, you're getting out on the water, a boat, moving in, getting your kids into a new place, driver's license, all that stuff, as Harry's witnessing right now. Call Aaron and his team at the Buhl Insurance Agency, 724-443-5610. They have locations in Gibsonia, Butler, Warrendale, Mars, and Allison Park. First of all, Harry, I want to apologize for the Hopewell attire here. I was just back from a travel baseball game, but we wanted to. I know you're getting ready to take off, you and the family, so we wanted to get one addition in with you.
Sure.
It's a light one. When I talk. I'm proud that you're a part of the site because a lot of people are starting to do this and they don't have experience. And I value experience. I value people that have done it before. And there's nobody in Pittsburgh, I can safely say that has the experience of covering Pitt Panther recruiting like you. And I think there's not a lot to talk about football-wise. We wanted to get you on, and I know Pitt fans will enjoy hearing these stories of you, how you started it, and we're going to have a bunch of stuff that I know people are going to enjoy. But first of all, I want to ask you, tell the fans, in case they're not aware of this, when you started this, your original website name, and what was the thinking behind it?
Well, going back first is I grew up in a mountaineer intensive environment with my father, George, and my uncle, Perry, and they talked recruiting a lot. They were way ahead of the curve, which spurred my interest in it. And they wanted to know about the player, what they were like, what offers they got. This is way ahead of the curve. So I was very interested, and I was the black sheep, and I went to Pitt. And this is the burgeoning of the internet when it was first getting started. All there was a Big East site. And there weren't many Pitt fans. I was one of the few that was there, and I had to fend off attacks from everybody. But what I started to do was start looking into players Pitt was looking at and start posting information. And that's where the moniker, the Pitt Guru, came out of nowhere, because the fans that were on that original Big East site said, dude, you're the guru, because I had factual information, and I would sometimes make calls to find it out. And it occurred to me, there might be like a market for this, or people want to hear about this. So when I graduated in 1996 from Pitt, I went and bought at Barnes & Noble a book on how to create an HTML site, and I created the Pitt Guru's Panther page. And some people still have links to it. It's out there in the ether somewhere, and it blew up. It got very, very big. And to make a long story short, I'll never forget where I was in my former career as an engineer. I'm sitting in my office and I get a call from Bobby Burton that developed Rivals.com. And he said, do you know you're getting thousands upon thousands of views? He goes, you're one of like the tops. So we registered me. Well, we want to sign you on as the Pitt publisher. And it was interesting. It coincided with my wedding on June 10th, 2000. And the only thing that occurred, we got so big that they'd start talking about my site at different meetings at the University of Pittsburgh. And someone said, wait a minute, I had switched the name to hailtopitt.com. And I end up receiving a call going, listen, we like you. We love what you're doing, but you got to change the name or we're looking at a lawsuit. The Post-Gazette picked up on it. Chuck Finder wrote an article on me. If anybody Googles Pitt puts foot down on Guru, it still exists. And I encourage anyone to do that. Pitt puts foot down on Guru. What they did do was write about Pitt making me change the name. They also talked about my wedding to my wife, and it ended up tripling my page views. So I've been ensconced ever since. And as far as I know, the Pitt Guru's Panther page, or hailtopitt.com, I still have shirts with that logo, is the very first ever site that was really Pitt intensive, covering Pitt football and basketball.
And that's why I've had a friendship with you. Our wives know each other, and I wanted to, when I made the scary decision of starting this, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, you never know what you're getting into. It was a leap of faith. When did you know that you had a big following? Was there a moment or something that happened?
It's a funny story. And again, we're talking about all these goofy stories. And fans need to understand, because now there's a million guys trying to cover Pitt. There's college students. I see it on Twitter. They're trying to do what we're doing right now. There was no one. So you're looking at the only guy that was doing it. I started calling, speaking, and interviewing players. And Mike, this was not easy. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. You had to pick up the phone, call the coach, pray the player would call you, try to get a hold of him. But going back to the class of 2003, Neil Tracy, and someone may not remember that name, but I do. He was out of Rhode Island, and he called me and says, "Listen, I want to let you know I'm going to be committing." He was 6'3" offensive guard, about 290. Didn't pan out. I don't know if he panned out well or not, but calls me and says, "I'm committing." I had posted on. I had kind of a meager message board, and I posted, "Hey, I know who committed. I need to eat dinner." My wife was on me. We were ready to sit down. And I said, when I get back, I'll post it. When I came back, I'm telling you, hundreds of Pitt fans were on, guessing who it was, yelling at me for making them wait. And I saw the volume of traffic, and I'm like, wow, I'm onto something. And this is definitely a viable market where people are interested in. And of course, I broke Tracy at that point. And but I always remember that name because it was a light bulb moment to go, whoa, because all these people I thought were reading were posting, and some were yelling at me, and it was amazing. So I'll never forget that moment.
One thing that we do this when I've started to realize that although they might not say it to you publicly, I don't think they want to admit this. What we do and what other sites do help teams keep track of players, how they're doing with players, but it also helps the player themselves, sometimes recruits. Do you remember the first one that you did as far as, well, I think I might have helped this kid out a little bit?
Well, again, this is another oddity, kind of funny story, but this is going back to two massive linemen, and I'm trying to remember what class they were involved in, but Rob Petiti, and a name, you have to be a diehard Pitt fan to know this name, Saul Froome. And let me get back to why this is significant. Rob Petiti, who was a 6'7", 320-pound giant, and he's still out there. I think we're connected on Facebook, was a 2-star recruit. Saul Froome was a 6'9", 4-star recruit. And Pitt wasn't landing 4 stars back then. So they were on both of them. I called Rob, and Rob had visited the same weekend with Saul. And I had also been in touch with the time, I didn't know if it's still out there, Prep Star magazine. And they were starting to monitor me. We had a connection going because I became their Pitt source. And I interviewed Rob, and he had just, I believe, called in whatever coach that was at the time, maybe Walt Harris, maybe before that, and committed. And again, the funny part is he was considered the project, despite his size. I ended up calling. It took me forever to get a hold of his coach. I interviewed his coach. Froome was the big deal at the time. So I'm on the phone with Saul, and he goes, "Wait, who are you just on with?" I said, "I was on with Rob Petiti. He committed. I just wanted to see what you thought." He goes, "Oh, crap." He goes, "Can I call you back in 10 minutes? Phone hangs up. And this is a big deal. He was a 4-star recruit. I wait. The phone rings again. He goes, "Holy crap. I didn't know he was going to commit that quick. They might have run out of scholarships. I just called and committed to Pitt." And it was strictly because he was worried about numbers. He was going to wait like another week or so and decided, I'm doing it. So when we got off the phone, I thought, boy, I wish they knew if I gave him an assist, but they just landed a 4-star recruit. Now, it's funny. It's funny. My boys, when I told them this story one time, Googled, Froome ended up, I didn't know if he lasted a year at Pitt. He ended up at Delaware. And he was still 6'9". He was a big kid. And ironically, the 2-star recruit, and we see this happen all the time, and Rob Petiti turned out to be an absolute stud in the Big East. So that was like the first time. It was a funny story where I had a player go, whoa, and they kind of called me. And I will tell you, you look at a guy here, if you slash my arm, I bleed blue and gold, and I won't apologize for it. So I will tell you this. I don't sell a recruit, but if a recruit has questions, I will answer them because I'm passionate about the university. I'm passionate about Pitt athletics, and I have no qualms. And I've heard all the negativity for the years. And I'm a martial artist. You punch me, I'm going to punch you back. And I make sure to always put Pitt in a good light because I believe in the school.
One of the things that we have I hear kids that tell me they're going to commit all the time, and we have to go through I respect the process because they don't have to talk to me. They don't have to tell me what they're doing. They don't have to tell me what their business is. They ask me, can you keep it quiet until, nowadays they make their video or however they want to do it. I'm sure it was different back then. But did you have I struggle all the time with keeping stuff that I want to put out there or even a commitment, keeping it silent. Do you remember your first one with that?
Oh, for sure. It's more comical, and I joked with them in the past. I hooked up with them on Facebook. One of the funniest commitments, HB Blades was a big name. Pitt needed defensive stoppers. He had the Blades name going into it. Pitt was fending off a lot of major schools, and I'm parked at the Best Buy in Robinson Township here up where I live by the airport. And he calls me and he says, listen, I want to let you know I'm going to commit. Now, keep in mind, I'm the single source at the time. There may have been some up and running fledgling competitors. I can't remember, but this is a big deal. This was a stud out of Florida. He was a Blades. So I'm like, I'm going to go home or I'm going to run to Kinko's, which is like 2 minutes from there. And I'm starting to type. And he goes, you got to do me a favor. And I can't remember the time frame, but he said, you need to sit on this for like a week. And I said, now now we do this all the time now. Fans, I'm sure at some level realize that. But back then this was a player I was getting 20 questions, 30, 40 questions a day about. It reminds me of William Jeffress this year. Every day, I had 20 people ask me about the kid. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, oh, my God, if they knew what I knew, but I couldn't say anything. And God bless him. When he was ready to go, he told me, we put it up, and the traffic went nuts. And obviously, he and I think Clint Session came in the same. That's when I really got to know Larry Bluestein. We talked about those guys for hours on the phone. But you know what? Larry nailed both. Larry said both are studs, both wound up in the NFL, and they were both great players for Pitt.
That's the same thing with me. It happened this year with Malik Newton, the running back. I was calling around. Pitt got a commitment at the time. And normally the case is we have our little list of guys that we think commit. And he was one of the guys I asked, did you commit? And he said, no, but I'm going to be committing in 2 weeks. I said, oh. And he just said, matter of fact, yeah, we have his date set up, blah, blah, blah. So for 2 weeks, I had to try to just sit on that and not put out stuff and not blow his cover. But at that time, as you mentioned, it's a lot easier for us now, with Twitter, different things you do to find out what's going on. Back then, you had to dig. What was the most digging you had to do to get a commitment story?
There were and then I tell you what, I'll give everybody wants a story. I'll give them a story in a minute about when it could hurt you, when you reveal something. But let me tell you about digging. I'll never forget this. Again, let me reiterate, this is the Stone Age. This isn't, the internet wasn't that. I mean, like, you had to really dig to find numbers, names. And I'd interviewed a player, and Pitt was wrapping up their class. And right at the end of the interview, they mentioned, by the way, myself and Vernon committed. And I go, whoa, who? And they said, yeah, big dude out of New Jersey, big dude, Bill. And I said, so automatically I knew I had a scoop, and I had a name maybe no one knew about. And I said, can you please get me the name? So the player first tells me Vernon Butts, Butts. So I immediately start trying to search. I can't find the player. The player that had committed at the time, I don't know if it was Amir Dew or who it was, calls me back and says, no, Vernon Butts. I figured it out. I jumped into the Yellow Pages, and he was from East Hampton or something like that, New Jersey. And I found 12 bots from that town. And when I tell you this is what you had to do back then, there wasn't, again, a direct line with Twitter, Instagram. I start calling. I had some people tell me off. By the fourth or fifth bots, a big, deep voice answers, hello? And I said, and you could tell it was a big dude. And I said, is this Vernon? I said, or is Vernon available? This is him. I said, did you visit Pitt? He goes, yeah. I go, did you commit? And from there, he committed. It was funny, and I got the story, and it was lunacy, but we ended up breaking the story because that's what it took back then. I had to go through the yellow pages and find these names, and, it was nuts. So I'll never forget that. The other one that was pretty funny was it was like one tiny little thread in a Canadian site. I would do Google searches on Pitt to make sure I was up on everything. And they mentioned that Pitt may have gotten a Canadian player. It ended up taking me a day and a half of calling Vancouver, all over these gyms. And finally, this guy's like, hey, what's going on, eh? You're down in Pittsburgh. I said, yeah. And the guy said, you landed Levon Kendall, the Mountie, and it's comical now, but no one had that name. They kind of knew we may have had a commitment, but it took me a day and a half calling Canada and fighting Moose and whatever else, Labatt's Beer, and I ended up getting the name. So it wasn't easy back then. I put hours in, but I took pride in breaking the stories, Now, the flip side of this, and we talked about, we talked about the story where I sat on it with HB Blades, was there was a player Pitt was after. It was a safety named Vince Beamer, and I think he was out of Harrisburg. And again, smarter Pitt fans will remember this. This is going back, and Pitt, he had committed to Pitt. His coach at the time, head coach, and I want to say his name was Wechter, but I'd have to go back and look, in Harrisburg. Beamer was a big-time prospect. It was a big get for Pitt. And his head coach said to him, if you commit, you shut down. And he told the other schools, you're to leave this kid alone. WVU did what some other schools do, but they were kind of dubious. WVU goes in, plucks him, and makes him visit the last weekend. And they did this, and they went around the coach. He commits to WVU. So I call the coach. We have a long talk, and he's ticked off. So I decide I'm going to put it out there. Because again, we have fatalistic fans. Some don't understand that we didn't technically lose the player. They really did kind of steal him because Pitt assumed that no one would be on him. So I put the story out, and I lit a fire under WVU Nation. They posted my home address. They posted my parents' home address. They knew that I was in the pharma industry calling on the Wheeling, West Virginia area. They had people go visit my clients complaining about what I did. They were posting memes of me that were nasty, like for a long period of time. They prank called my parents' house. I mean, it was like this uprising because I called them out. It was so bad, and I kept calling the publisher down there, Vernon, I can't remember what his last name was. It publishes the WVU site. So finally, at the time, I was 210 pounds. I was boxing. I was doing the keto. I decided, I'm going to go mafia here. And I ended up actually copying Bobby Burton at Arrivals and said, we have two options. Either you curtail these stories on me and take all this down. It was getting bad. They were contacting my clients. Or I'm going to drive to Morgantown and we're going to take care of business. And Bobby ended up getting a hold of me and said, I think he's going to kill you. You better calm things down. They removed everything. But it really, I mean, not that it bit me in the butt, but I was astonished at how they went pure vigilante. I had some of my clients call me going, what did you do? And all I did was reveal what they did. I called them out, and it got really ugly. So crazy times, man. It's the only time where doing something for the site ever affected negatively my personal life. It was crazy.
Crazy stories. You also told me one before about Joe Flacco's father.
Oh, I'm never going to forget this the rest of my life. And the funny part is, if no one knows this, I'm a West Allegheny guy. I just won a community service award last year for the area here. I'm ensconced in the area. I'm West A proud. Okay, so Pitt has Tyler Palco and Joe Flacco. And I did all of the articles on Joe. I got to know his father, got to know his family. And for those probably that remember, it came down to a two-person race. It was those two vying for the starting position for Pitt. And they chose the local hero, Tyler Palco. His father, Flacco's father, was incensed, to say the least, like really miffed. So I'm sure he went down the coaching staff and gave them a piece of his mind. And the last person, what happens, and like you and I hear this a lot here, hey, Coach P, when a player calls me, sometimes they associate us with the coaching staff. He decided to call me, and I told him I have nothing to do with the decision. And he was pissed, and he ripped into me and started yelling about homerism with Tyler and screaming and start ripping into me. And I couldn't do anything. I just sat there on the phone. I said, and I did say to him, you have a very talented 6'6" son. Let this ride out. Give it one more year. He didn't want to hear it. So as far as I know, the last like venom spewed by the Flaccos came into my ear. Now, to his credit, we got to go back and look. He did say something. He said, my son will make it big. And he did win a Super Bowl. So you know what? He proved everybody right. But it's a moment that I'll never forget because I picked up the phone. I said 3 words and I held the phone out to hear. He was flaming ticked. So interesting times, interesting stories. When you're doing as long as I have, you've seen and heard it all.
But speaking of heard, schools negative recruit against each other. That's just might not be nice or whatever, but it's a business and they're going to do whatever they can to get a player. What's the you've heard stories? What's the most negative thing you heard somebody say about Pitt?
The consistency in this goes back decades. I've been at it 20 years. I've heard it all. When I hear it, I correct it each and every time, and I get sick of hearing it. And our friends over in Happy Valley, I've heard it from our friends down in Morgantown, and I've heard it from, honestly, a lot of ACC and Big East. If you go to Pitt, you're basically entering a demilitarized zone. You're entering a war zone at Oakland. They try to stigmatize an urban campus as this place where you're going to get mugged within a month, that it's dangerous. And, I always kind of flip that around. And what's beautiful, you think of this recent video that Pat Narduzzi and his staff put out. Louis Riddick was narrating. The amazing part is it shows the beauty of the campus. But what I do is turn that around. It's utter nonsense. I dispel and debunk that rumor. And I also tell them, you know what? Go to your cow pasture. Go wherever you want to go. Enjoy the cows. Enjoy the solitude. When you come to Pittsburgh, you're one of the greatest cities in the country, great sports town. You have so much to do. So I don't just talk about Pitt in and of itself. I talk about the city. But I've had to have that discussion way too many times because the vitriol they spewed on urban campus drives me crazy. So that's why sometimes fans don't understand. I get so tired of when I hear, "Whoa, we lost them." Well, they don't realize what the other schools are saying and putting in their ear, And I'm of the opinion you sell the positive. Capel kind of talked about this recently. He's selling the positives of Pitt. You know what I mean? And it's all you need to do. And he's ignoring. He never trashes the school. But unfortunately, Pitt's been the victim a lot of times of that.
Last thing, Harry, is we're fortunate. I'm fortunate. I know that is the 2 jobs that I've had in my life. I've loved them. KDK for 20 years, and then doing this. I enjoy doing it. And you, being an alumni, you enjoy doing it too. So I'm sure you had some neat moments over the years, either through the site or just through games or whatever. Give me your favorite moment of covering Pitt.
And the great part about this, my answer to this, and it coincides with my youngest, who turns 14 tomorrow. We had the party last night, but he turns 14 tomorrow. I have raised 2 rabid Pitt fans, but no one is more rabid and more passionate a Pitt fan, maybe more than me, than my youngest son, Max. And probably the most magical moment I had as a father is when you take them from a fan to a psychotic fan, rabid, and I call it the lunatic fringe, and I'm part of that. I can admit that. And when Max and I, and he was little, we went to the military bowl. The best thing I ever did was taken, and we stayed at the hotel where the team was staying. And it was like a little kid, literally a little kid in a candy store. The second we walked in, we ran into the coaching staff. We ran into Coach Narduzzi. We ran into so many of the players. They were so kind. I go back to Shaq Soto and all these other guys who were taking pictures, Quadri Henderson, and spent time with Max, Kellen McAlone, and just going through. Even when we were eating dinner at the hotel, we were surrounded by nothing but Pitt people. And you look at, class acts like E.J. Borghetti, and I could go on and on. He stayed up. He was so excited till like 2 a.m. Then to add to all that, and he couldn't stop talking to my wife. He was so excited about the experience. Was right before we went to the game, Quadri Henderson ran off the bus came over, gave me a big hug, practically picked Max up off the ground, gave me a huge hug. In the first play of that game, Quadri ran it back to the house to score. Now, we got beat pretty badly. The other thing I remember, and it kind of ties in with James Conner's book, was I remember we were one of the first. We got to the stadium, and a couple people recognized me and grabbed me, and Max and I got to sign the big placard for James Conner, the Conner Strong banner, wishing him luck on his fight with cancer. So it was the one day where I saw that switch flip, that kind of couple days where my son will be a fan for life. He follows recruiting as much as I do. His teachers call him Little Guru, which is really funny. And I'll never forget. It was a magical weekend. And like I said, I know we're ready for the next bowl game. Hopefully it's coming up soon here. So, like I said, I will always be a Pitt man, and I believe blue and gold.
All right, brother. I appreciate this. I know Pitt fans will sometimes when we get light here, we always talk recruiting and X's and O's and all that. We figure I want to lean on your experience a little bit, and hope they enjoyed this as much as I did. But Harry, I appreciate the time. As always, you go enjoy the family, and maybe when you come back, we'll have some more recruits to talk about.
Well, I'll be coming back from the beach. I'll be much more tan, so let's do a lot of videos at that point. So God bless everybody. Everybody stay safe, and it's always great talking with you, Mike.
Our Pitt Panther Talk segment is always sponsored by the Buhl Insurance Agency, 724-443-5610. Locations: Gibsonia, Butler, Warrendale, Mars, Allison Park. We appreciate Aaron Buhl and his team who's a big Pitt fan. We appreciate him supporting what we do here on Pittsburgh Sports Now. For Harry Psaros, Mike Vukovcan, we'll join you down the road for another edition of Pitt Panther Talk.
Sounds good. Take care.